AITA for refusing to cover outrageous costs for my future SIL's bridal shower. They treat me like their own wallet. I'm a 23-year-old woman, and I'm engaged to the love of my life. We've been together for a while, and I truly adore his family. His older sister, who's 28, is getting married in October 2025, and she asked me to be a bridesmaid. I was genuinely thrilled when she asked. I love her, and I want to support her on her special day, but now that everything is in full swing, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed by the sheer cost and expectations. To give you a little background, I've been a bridesmaid before, so I know it's not cheap. When I said yes to being part of her bridal party, I went in with my eyes wide open, or so I thought. However, this particular wedding has taken things to a whole new level, and I'm struggling to keep up, both emotionally and financially. Let's start with the bridesmaid dress. When we went shopping, she picked out a stunning dress that's admittedly beautiful. It was also $300, which is a lot for me, but I figured it was just part of the deal. On top of the dress, there were the required shoes. Not just any shoes, mind you, specific shoes that matched the dress. Those cost another $75. Okay, I thought, deep breaths. It's manageable. Then came the bachelorette trip. It's a destination trip to a popular city known for its nightlife, and while I knew it would be pricey, I was initially under the impression that attendance was optional. The bride and maid of honor had reassured us early on that it wasn't a big deal if some of us couldn't make it. But that all changed when my future mother-in-law chimed in. She said it would be shitty for any of us to miss the trip and implied that it would reflect poorly on us as bridesmaids if we didn't attend. So, even though I was hesitant, I booked the trip because I didn't want to be seen as the bad guy. The cost of the trip was staggering. Flights, accommodations, and activities added up to nearly $1,000. I tried to swallow my frustration because I wanted to make it special for her. But just when I thought I had budgeted for everything, the maid of honor dropped another bombshell. We were also responsible for covering all of the bride's expenses during the trip. That meant her meals, drinks, and anything else she wanted. This had never been discussed beforehand, and it felt like a slap in the face after I had already stretched myself so thin to make the trip happen. Suddenly, the $1,000 I had budgeted turned into even more, and I felt completely blindsided. At this point, I was starting to feel the weight of all these expenses, but I kept telling myself that it would be worth it in the end. Then came the conversation about the bridal shower. My future mother-in-law pulled me aside and informed me that, as a bridesmaid, I was expected to help cover the costs of the shower. She even went as far as to say she had Googled it and found that bridal shower expenses should fall on the bridesmaids, not the mother of the bride. This was news to me. In every wedding I've been part of, the shower was typically hosted and funded by family or a close family friend. The bridesmaids would contribute in smaller ways, helping with decorations, organizing games, or bringing desserts, but not footing the entire bill. The expectations for this bridal shower are massive. My future sister-in-law wants it to be catered, with fancy decorations, custom favors, and a venue that isn't cheap. I don't mind helping out, but I'm also trying to save for my own wedding, which is planned for mid-2026. My fiancé and I are just starting to build our lives together, and we're not exactly rolling in money. I've tried to set a budget for myself, but every time I think I have a handle on the costs, something new comes up. I also know I'm not the only one feeling the pressure. The other bridesmaids, who are all around my age, have expressed similar concerns. Most of us are in the early stages of our careers, and we don't have unlimited funds to pour into someone else's wedding. It's not that we don't want to celebrate her, we do. But it feels like the expectations are becoming unreasonable, and there's no room for discussion or compromise. What's even more frustrating is that my future sister-in-law seems to be choosing things that aren't even within her own budget and assuming other people will cover the difference. It's starting to feel less like a celebration and more like a financial burden, and I hate feeling this way because I really do care about her. At this point, I don't know what to do. I want to support her and make this time special, but I also need to set boundaries. I've already spent more on this wedding than I have on any other wedding I've been part of, and it's not even close to being over. In the past, I've spent about $1,200 total as a bridesmaid, but this time, that amount didn't even cover the bachelorette trip. I'm starting to dread what other expenses might pop up between now and October. How much is too much to ask of your bridesmaids? Is it unreasonable for me to want to draw the line somewhere? I don't want to come across as selfish or unsupportive, but I'm reaching a breaking point. I know weddings are expensive, and I get that this is her big day, but where do we draw the line between celebrating someone and draining ourselves financially? Update 1. So, after the bridal shower fiasco where I had already spent way more than I ever planned, I thought we were finally done with major expenses. I figured, okay, the bridal shower is over, the bachelorette trip is behind us, and the dress and shoes are already bought. Surely, we'd finally be able to settle into just counting down the days to the wedding. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Just when I thought I could breathe, my future sister-in-law, Jessica, and my future mother-in-law, Karen, decided to throw another curveball. Apparently, it was now a thing for the bridal party to have custom robes for the getting ready photos on the wedding day. Now, don't get me wrong, I've seen those photos online. They're cute. But they had decided on designer silk robes with embroidered initials. These weren't simple robes from a department store, they were designer, custom-made, and $150 each. For a robe that we'd wear for maybe 2 hours while getting hair and makeup done. But wait. There's more. Karen also informed us that Jessica wanted us to have a matching set of custom pajamas for the night before the wedding. According to her, it would look adorable in the photos from the sleepover they planned to have at the hotel suite. These pajamas were another $100 per person. At this point, I was seeing dollar signs every time I blinked. I wanted to say no. I needed to say no. But Karen has this way of making it impossible to push back. She loves to throw in these subtle guilt trips about family obligations and how this is the most important day of Jessica's life. And Jessica doesn't help. She's not outright demanding, but she makes these comments that leave you feeling like the worst person in the world if you don't comply. Things like, oh, I know it's a lot to ask, but it would just mean so much to me, and I'd really hate for there to be any awkwardness on the big day. So, I caved. Again. I paid for the robe. I paid for the pajamas. Another $250 down the drain. But the hits kept coming. Next on the agenda was the pre-wedding spa day. Now, I'd heard whispers about this event earlier, but I assumed it was optional. I mean, who in their right mind would make a spa day mandatory? Well, apparently, Jessica and Karen. They sent out an itinerary for the wedding week, and right there in bold letters was SPA day, required for all bridesmaids. Required. Not suggested. Not recommended. Required. The spa day included massages, facials, and manicures. It sounded luxurious, sure. But it also came with a $250 price tag. When I saw the cost, my stomach dropped. I'd already spent thousands of dollars on this wedding, and now they wanted me to drop another $250 for a spa day I didn't even want to attend. I mean, who decides this stuff? I tried to push back. I told Karen that I couldn't afford it, especially on top of everything else. Her response: "You're marrying into this family, so you need to show you're willing to make sacrifices for family." She made it sound like I was the selfish one for even hesitating. And of course, Jessica chimed in with how important it was to her that all the girls be there to relax together before the wedding. By this point, I'd spent over $5,000 between the dress, shoes, bachelorette trip, bridal shower, custom robes, pajamas, and now this spa day. I was drained, financially, emotionally, and mentally. Every time I thought we were done, there was another expense. Another thing that was important to Jessica or Karen. Another way to make me feel like I wasn't doing enough to support the bride. When my fiancé, Eric, found out about the spa day, he was livid. He couldn't believe how much money I had spent already, and he was furious that Karen and Jessica were guilt-tripping me into spending more. He told me to draw a line, to stand up for myself, but every time I tried, I was met with more manipulation. Karen would say things like, well, if she's going to be part of this family, she needs to understand what's expected. And Jessica would pile on with her passive-aggressive comments, making me feel like the worst person in the world for even questioning their demands. Update 2. Just when I thought this whole ordeal couldn't get any worse, another bombshell dropped. Jessica sent out a group message to all the bridesmaids with the wedding day schedule. At first, I was relieved to see an itinerary, I figured it would help keep things organized and, hopefully, signal that the spending spree was coming to an end. But then I scrolled down, and at the bottom of the message, there was a link to a makeup artist and hairstylist who had been booked for the bridal party. My initial thought was, oh, that's nice, they've hired professionals for those who might want the service. But, of course, it wasn't optional. Attached to the link was a note: Jessica wants all the bridesmaids to have a cohesive look, so we'll all be using these professionals for hair and makeup. It's important for the photos. My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. Sure enough, another message followed with the price: $300 for makeup and $300 for hair. That's $600 per person, on top of everything else we'd already spent. And there was no room for negotiation, no doing your own makeup, no opting for a less expensive stylist. This was the only option, and it wasn't up for discussion. I stared at my phone in disbelief. How was this real life? At this point, it felt like I was being dragged along in some bizarre, never-ending bridal horror story. I had already spent thousands of dollars on this wedding, and now they were asking for another $600 for something I could have easily done myself, or had done by someone far cheaper. I knew how to do my own makeup. I wasn't clueless. And I could have gone to a local salon for a blowout for a fraction of the price. But none of that mattered. Jessica and Karen had decided that everything had to be perfectly curated, no matter the cost. When I gently asked in the group chat if we could use our own people or do it ourselves to save money, Karen swooped in immediately. She didn't waste any time laying on the guilt. Jessica deserves to have her vision realized. If you're not willing to be part of that, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to be a bridesmaid. That was it. No acknowledgement of how expensive this had become, no consideration for the financial strain it was putting on everyone. Just a veiled threat that if I didn't go along with their plans, I was somehow failing Jessica and the family. At this point, I felt completely trapped. If I backed out now, it would cause massive drama. I couldn't imagine the fallout if I told Jessica I wasn't willing to be a bridesmaid anymore. It would create tension between me and Eric's family, and I didn't want to put him in the middle of all of that. But staying in the bridal party felt like I was slowly sinking into quicksand, with no way out. Every new expense was like another weight dragging me down, and I couldn't catch my breath. So, I paid. Again. I handed over another $600 for hair and makeup on top of everything else. At this point, I felt so defeated that I started doing something I probably should have done months ago. I made a spreadsheet. I sat down with all the receipts, all the payments, all the little Venmo transfers I'd sent for this wedding, and I totaled it all up. I knew it was bad. I knew it was adding up. But when I saw the final number staring back at me, my heart sank. $5,950. I stared at that number for a long time, feeling a mix of anger, disbelief, and exhaustion. Nearly $6,000. And the wedding hadn't even happened yet. That number didn't include the cost of travel to the wedding venue, which was out of state. It didn't include any last-minute surprises that I was sure were still lurking around the corner. It didn't even account for the gift I'd need to buy for Jessica and her fiancé. This wasn't just expensive, it was completely out of control. What made it worse was the resentment that had started building inside me. I wanted to support Jessica. I wanted to be part of her big day. But this wasn't just about celebrating her anymore. It felt like I was being milked dry, like my role as a bridesmaid wasn't about being there for her emotionally but about funding her vision of the perfect wedding. Every time I tried to set a boundary or express concern, I was shut down. It didn't matter how much I'd already spent, there was always more to give. I started to feel guilty about my own wedding. Eric and I were planning a mid-2026 wedding, and we'd been saving every penny we could. I didn't want to start our marriage in debt, so we'd agreed on a modest budget. But now I was dipping into that savings account to fund Jessica's wedding. Every dollar I spent on her big day was one less dollar we could put toward our own. And yet, any time I tried to explain this, I was met with comments about how you only get married once, and how it was my duty as a future family member to go above and beyond. Update 3. By January, I thought I had seen it all. After months of ridiculous expenses, guilt trips, and passive-aggressive comments from Karen and Jessica, I figured there couldn't possibly be anything left to throw at us. I was already teetering on the edge, financially and emotionally, trying to keep it together while being steamrolled by their unrelenting wedding demands. But of course, I underestimated them. It all happened during a family dinner one cold Sunday evening. Karen had invited everyone over, and while I knew wedding talk was inevitable, I wasn't prepared for the bombshell she was about to drop. Halfway through the meal, she started talking about the rehearsal dinner. I had assumed it would be a typical event, the night before the wedding, close to the venue, maybe something casual at a restaurant or someone's home. That assumption was laughably naive. Karen announced, with an air of grandeur, that the rehearsal dinner wouldn't be held the night before the wedding. Instead, it was scheduled for March, 7 months before the wedding. It was going to be held at a luxury winery about an hour away from the wedding venue, and it wasn't going to be just dinner. It was going to be a full-day event, wine tastings, a catered multi-course meal, live music, and custom floral arrangements. According to Karen, this was so that everyone could experience the venue without feeling rushed and have plenty of time to soak in the ambience. I sat there, trying to process the absurdity of what I was hearing. A destination rehearsal dinner? 7 months in advance? At a luxury winery? Who does that? But Karen wasn't done. She went on to explain that the winery had a $10,000 minimum spending requirement for private events, and they were struggling to meet it. That's when she turned to the bridal party, flashing that practiced smile of hers, and asked us to help Jessica's dream come true by chipping in. She wanted each bridesmaid to contribute $500. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy and suffocating. I could see the discomfort on the other bridesmaids' faces, but no one spoke up. My stomach churned as Karen casually justified her request, as though asking us to fork over another $500, on top of the thousands we'd already spent, was completely reasonable. I felt the heat rising in my face. I had reached my limit. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. When I finally said I couldn't afford it, Karen's smile disappeared. Her tone turned cold, and she delivered the same line I'd heard too many times before: if you can't afford to be a bridesmaid, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to it. Her words felt like a slap in the face. I tried to explain, again, that I had already spent thousands of dollars on this wedding, that I was saving for my own wedding, and that this was simply too much. But Karen cut me off, her voice sharp and dismissive. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, she said. You can always make more money, but Jessica can only have one wedding. I was stunned. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. The other bridesmaids avoided my gaze, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to back me up. It was like I was standing on an island, completely alone, while Karen and Jessica looked on with thinly veiled disapproval. I felt trapped, like no matter what I did, I was going to be the villain in their story. Later that night, when Eric and I got home, I told him everything. I laid it all out, every expense, every guilt trip, every time I felt manipulated into spending money I didn't have. I told him about the $500 for the rehearsal dinner and Karen's cutting comment about how I should step down if I couldn't afford it. Eric was furious. He couldn't believe how much I had already spent, and he was livid that his mother and sister were treating me this way. For the first time, he said the words I'd been too afraid to even think: you should step down as a bridesmaid. The idea sent a wave of relief through me, but it was immediately followed by a crushing sense of dread. If I stepped down, I knew it would cause major drama. Karen would weaponize it, twisting the narrative to make me look selfish and ungrateful. Jessica would use it as proof that I didn't care about her or the family. It would strain my relationship with Eric's entire family, and I didn't want to put him in the middle of that. But staying in the bridal party felt impossible. I had already sacrificed so much, my savings, my time, my energy, and now they wanted even more. I started to question everything. How did it get to this point? How did I let myself be dragged so far into this nightmare? Weddings are supposed to be joyful, a celebration of love and family. But this wasn't joyful. It was suffocating. It was manipulative. It was toxic. I felt like I had lost myself somewhere along the way, drowning in their endless demands. For the first time, I seriously considered walking away. Not just from the bridal party, but from the wedding altogether. I didn't know if I could face another 9 months of this, knowing it was only going to get worse. I didn't want to hurt Eric, but I also didn't want to lose myself trying to please people who clearly didn't value me. It was a lose-lose situation, and I didn't know how much more I could take. The spreadsheet I had been keeping now showed a total of $6,450. That was before the $500 they wanted for the rehearsal dinner. Before the travel expenses for March. Before whatever other surprises they had in store. And with every dollar added, my resentment grew. I wasn't just resentful of Jessica and Karen, I was starting to resent myself for letting it get this far. For not standing up for myself sooner. For putting their happiness above my own well-being. The next morning, I sat down with Eric and told him I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep draining my savings, my energy, and my sanity for a wedding that wasn't even mine. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit how much it was hurting me. Eric was supportive, telling me he would back me no matter what I decided. But the choice wasn't easy. Walking away would mean confrontation, drama, and fallout. Staying would mean continuing to sacrifice myself for people who didn't seem to care. Update 4. Jessica managed to outdo herself yet again. Toward the end of the month, I received an email titled, "Exciting Wedding Updates." At this point, the words, "exciting," and "wedding," in the same sentence made my stomach churn, but I opened it anyway, knowing I probably didn't have a choice but to deal with whatever insanity was coming next. The email started innocently enough, with Jessica gushing about how everything was coming together beautifully and how grateful she was to have such an amazing bridal party by her side. Then came the bombshell. Jessica and Karen had decided to add a fireworks display to the wedding reception. Not just sparklers or something simple, oh no, this was going to be a full, professional fireworks show. Jessica described how much she'd always dreamed of having fireworks at her wedding, how it would make the night magical and feel like a fairy tale. Then, tucked into the middle of the email like it was no big deal, was the cost, $6,000. And, of course, the bridal party was expected to help cover it. Each bridesmaid was asked to contribute an additional $200 toward the display. Jessica framed it as if she were doing us a favor, saying how it wasn't just for her but for everyone to enjoy. She wrote, "It's going to be such a special moment for all of us, and I know you'll love it just as much as I will." I stared at the email in disbelief. Was this a joke? I had already spent nearly $6,000 on this wedding, and now they wanted more. I could feel my chest tighten as I realized this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the complete disregard for boundaries, the entitlement, and the constant guilt-tripping. Jessica and Karen didn't see me, or any of the bridesmaids, as people with our own lives, responsibilities, or financial limits. We were just ATM machines to fund their vision of a perfect day. I sat with the email for hours, going back and forth about what to do. I was tired of being the person who always caved, who always found a way to make things work even when it was to my own detriment. This time, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. The thought of sending Jessica another $200 made me physically ill. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle of it. Enough was enough. I decided to call Jessica directly. I wanted to explain my position calmly, to let her know that I was financially and emotionally overwhelmed and simply couldn't keep up with the growing expenses. I thought, maybe if I approached it with honesty and vulnerability, she would understand. But Jessica's response was anything but understanding. She listened to what I had to say and then hit me with the coldest, most dismissive statement I'd ever heard from her. "If you're not willing to go the extra mile for me, maybe you're not cut out to be a bridesmaid." Those words felt like a punch to the gut. After everything I had done, every dollar spent, every sacrifice made, this was her response. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized there was no winning here. No amount of money or effort would ever be enough for Jessica or Karen. They would keep pushing, keep demanding, until there was nothing left of me to give. I didn't even have the energy to respond. I handed the phone to Eric, who had been sitting next to me, silently listening to the conversation. Without hesitation, he told Jessica, "You're right. She's not cut out to be your bridesmaid, because you've turned this into a nightmare. She's done." He hung up before she could respond, and I just sat there in stunned silence. Relief, anger, sadness, it all hit me at once. The next day, Karen called me. I knew she wouldn't take this lying down, and I was right. She was furious, accusing me of abandoning the family and letting everyone down. She lectured me about how Jessica deserved the world and how I was being selfish for not supporting her. I could feel my heart racing, the familiar anxiety creeping in, but before Karen could guilt-trip me any further, Eric grabbed the phone. He didn't yell or lose his temper. Instead, he calmly but firmly shut her down. He told her that I had given more than enough, that we were trying to build our own lives and save for our own wedding, and that they needed to respect my decision. He made it clear that if Karen or Jessica tried to push me any further, it would strain their relationship with him, too. For the first time in months, I felt like someone was truly on my side. The fallout wasn't pretty. Jessica unfollowed me on social media, and Karen made sure to send a passive-aggressive text to Eric about how disappointed she was in me. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. I wasn't waking up every day with a pit in my stomach, dreading the next expense or demand. I wasn't being guilt-tripped into sacrificing my own happiness for someone else's. Eric and I sat down that weekend and went over our finances. We started fresh, making a plan to rebuild the savings I had drained for Jessica's wedding. It felt so good to shift my focus back to my own life, my own goals, and my own wedding. We talked about what we wanted for our big day, something simple, intimate, and meaningful. No extravagant expenses, no fireworks displays, no guilt-tripping friends and family into funding it. Just a celebration of us. Looking back, I wish I had stood up for myself sooner. I wish I had recognized the red flags earlier and set boundaries before things spiraled out of control. But stepping down as a bridesmaid was one of the hardest, and best, decisions I've ever made. It taught me the importance of saying no, of valuing my own well-being, and of not letting people take advantage of me. Jessica's wedding is still months away, and I have no doubt there will be more chaos and drama. But it's not my chaos anymore. Eric and I are focusing on our future, and I'm determined to never let anyone walk all over me like that again.